perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merits of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of the happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. I beseech the great Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Marapa, Milarepa, Gampopa, Pakmodrupa, Lord Jiten Songgon, at the feet of the root guru, who possesses the 3 ways of kindness, and all the root gurus and spiritual masters of the lineage, the Idams and Dharma protectors. May your marvelous blessings permeate my mind. You have realized the uncontrived self-aware Dhammakaya. Your unconditioned great love pervades all beings and realms. With your immeasurable enlightened activity, you guide those to be tamed according to their inclinations. I supplicate you, the son of the teachings of the Absolute Truth. The ground is sprinkled with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with Meru, the supreme mountain, the 4 continents, and the sun and moon. As the Buddha field, I offer it. May all sentient beings attain the happiness of the Buddha fields. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the greater, lesser, and ordinary vehicles in accordance with the understanding and different mental capacities of each of sentient beings.
Everybody sanga grone tahidile tatarin jasonze tritrin tayang manari bengor the katan di yama padam bangivati tate pachine tritamon getri namtalaji ta gujetini lamaltini tritakariche goechu Milarepa part of the Sabatok Dewa, Bonizini, Kodo Sancho Sen, Jetting at the Mass of Mare, the Nagatan of Lushari.
So today we are seeing each other again, and today I'm continuing with Milarepa's songs. And so we mentioned yesterday the song about Bardabum. And there's the story of how she had given rise to faith in Milarepa, and then there's a song that shows how we should actually practice following Guru. And so there is a song that Milarepa sang in relation to the 6 paramitas, on the basis of the relative bodhicitta, and that is what I will share with you today.
Dunge Jantin no Japa, Luda Drasang Dramojet, Dunge Tanti Luda Song, Luda Territory, Tong Lula Cha, Tong Dachi, Dadi Lusong, Ludelity, Toa Toga Goni, Jason Donity, Dewa Shi, Donala Dan, the Chadang Tobatri, when you cover Papa Najeti, Panyam Pamila, Pamites owner, the Tipa Chatri, so I'm Chokde Chokde, water don't call it, Tamai, Zome Bessim, Tati Quada, Teni, they're taking about the Lema, they're taking about the Junji Togelatini. 그냥 답이 주사적 생명체는 타독 사제 고마 토야요네 이제 같은 코와 주마다워서 이런 코를 잡이게 될 루들이 또당서 루드 짜치 못 저요래 루드 짜치 못 저거 또 가려들 물론 뭐 현재 답이 추당체나 진랑이 동지 doctor이 사제적 고마 토야요래 내가 심지 사야법을 동제 덮고요래 대회는 들이 물론 뭐 저 용기는 요요래
And then here in the beginning of the song, the Jetsun said, if you want to practice the Dharma purely, you must understand worldly activity to be an enemy and leave it all behind. So understanding worldly activity to be an enemy. So among the 6 realms of samsara, it is that the supreme birth is the human birth, the precious human birth. And the human body is considered to be extremely precious. However, Sakya Pandita had said, if this ocean of suffering when it would take on, would be a vessel or take on form, that is like basically saying that the enemy, one's own enemy that causes all harm in this ocean of suffering is one's own body. It's because all the suffering that we experience really comes from the body. First of all, self-grasping has created this body, and then we become attached to this body and we follow the sensations of our 6 sense doors, 6 kinds of feelings. And we do that due to having a body. And then we become attached to pleasurable experiences and develop aversion against unpleasant experiences. And these thoughts of attachment and aversion are accumulated like snow falling down continuously day and night. And as we accumulate these tendencies of attachment and aversion, our merit declines more and more. And so we continue to wander in the 6 realms of samsara. There are countless sentient beings without form also that wander in cyclic existence. But then it is due to possessing this continuum of Buddha nature on the basis that if we encounter the holy Dharma, then due to possessing Buddha nature, we can attain enlightenment. But until then, we wander in samsara temporarily, like in an illusion, in the illusory samsara. And the basis of wandering in samsara is this body. And yet this body is considered to be very precious. And the reason why it is considered precious is because if this human body encounters the holy Dharma, in that way one can accomplish the dual purpose of others and oneself, and one can attain the state of enlightenment. One has an ability to bring great benefit to millions of sentient beings. And that is the reason why the precious human body is called to be a good quality, is said that it is a good quality, and that's the only reason.
원봉 그리고 나타 등이라서가 탄지 뒷박차 되들이 샘들 나오냐마도 요리들이 뒷박차 사마양 연구요리 뒷박차대 가려지다 당서 저희들은 빠져봐는 길로 요리 Matse Delatri, Tati Tata, Dewa the Dewa just a demarcated the Sumbakami, Takari, Kudum Sanjok, and the educated something always. Something is somewhat part of the Sabato. They come towards and Tatuk had your company generate. The way they are that they were just something that they might get. Dungata Dunga just a carry, Dadi is on Dadi Kaiso, Dadi, Tupol in Yuma talk. Shada Yoga Yuma talk the later, Tagi something to me, thoughts of the water goes to me, Yuma talk around the Songoyore. Trita that Dewa the David Jersey, somebody immediately Songave, Devatam, Trita the Danji and Yuma was so the Dongi, they go to the way that took some water, oh, somebody Nijuna, the Jibayan Yore, Atchore, pay part of the Sabato Teta, they were just more to none. They tamchin, the Tata was somebody Nija Gongo, don't they, Tetungo Yore.
So in this and in future lives, the mind goes on due to the perception of self and other and our grasping at true reality. And so due to that, we suffer impoverishment, hunger and thirst, disease, and various kinds of suffering. And all of this arises from the habitual imprint of an I, a me. And just like on a TV show, we are going around spending our life. And so so here in this song, it is then explained that what we need to cultivate in order to achieve happiness. So happiness, may all beings have happiness, the causes of happiness, is what we are shown here as the relative bodhicitta. We need to cultivate love. And when you have love, then you naturally have the 6 paramitas. And then you have the cause for attaining birth in the higher realms temporarily and ultimately enlightenment. So when we say may beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, we're saying may beings have happiness and love, which is the cause of happiness. And may beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Cause of suffering is self-grasping. And it is only from self-grasping that the 6 afflictive emotions arise. And then as we act on these afflictions, we experience suffering as a result. Primarily the suffering in the 3 lower realms and all the suffering in the 6 realms of samsara. All of that is the natural manifestation of the 6 afflictive emotions. So happiness and the cause of happiness is love and compassion. Self-grasping leads to suffering. So this is what we are introduced to here. And so the ultimate point here is that when love and compassion arises, then naturally you will practice the 6 paramitas, such as generosity, ethical discipline, and so on. So we are really here being introduced to the cause of happiness, which is love and compassion. So this song really explains the need for us to cultivate love and compassion.
Oh. Sondo somo de baje tendeve sama shurda jase trapse chulo jase trapse ma chulo jamba jamba to jase na seven ka chebe di pibara zonja no baje sena go yamba shila san trisa shila jadde chola son tri asaje ke tri 추수도 토마들이 단지가 인고 세나 추답게 도다 지박 토마송을 지박 담제도 어서사지 지박도 자체 보이 저때 단지가 인보에 그리다도 체인데에 스마실랑 랭송나더니 메체인데를 멀리데 뭐다 로도 남자 공신이되나 이 메체도 답저 히가고 권들이 유르보에서 히가고 권다 유르보송거리 배 장, 주, 대라서 뭘 마보선 거요. 대답지 쌍 것은 오 다다에 대성 오 물리도 톱 가고 이제 에 자리니 마도 톱 가고 이서 대성한테는 들까지 물리 마 톱은 고안 잡을 랭들들이 뭐 그거 것도 가지고 짐바레 대라들이 다다다데 짐바 동거들이 다 짐바도 가래 연구를 센나 연구를 센나라고 가래 되는 pero senna chene rangla senna mena senna chene saaderi jakkogeteri sujak soko chaatako yo mare rangla khasa go senna yona teri senna ma jene ya yang ba chedere longtu busum topa yogo yore ye kangni yone teri samje la teri ning tawwa ni singeri jiba tawa di peyong songo yore teri jiba la tara rangge o ngara pesha ma bo me rang chotam ma to me samna ti semgi jiba to teri ko 타다 들이지에서 지발 세 감적 점사로 계획사 왔었는데 셈 쪼치 버리 그것도 말이 셈 쪼치 버리 들이랑 모아지는 꼭자 가라 톨라로 왔다 들지 마 타는들이 카데마 포데마 트라다가 대타게라들이 다 타게로 도고요래 탐지 제벌랑 로요 바데 제바가 비용요 봐 대심지 원봉 지검지 상게 동해지 일을 시켰나 들이 달아서 봤다 대담지 동해지 이 동해지 저때 센나야 봐 센나지 강에서 센나지 노차를 송을 대회들은 노차다 센나이 송래 들이 노차를 뛰는 멀리 통해 센나를 들이 다 기와 양랭이 요래 배때다we 유무버리 세레지 하고서 sana 들이다다 네 기록 지다게 송고요래 또 뭐지 시켜 송래 오 남편 동창을 쏘고래 사인도 상태마다 말해 딱가리 이제 봐도 그래서 송 때만 못 송고요래 기록 지다게 이제 봐도 추첨도 하자니 못 송고요래 대사지 저다 기록 지마 기록 탐지 약고래 못돼 되는 기록 탐지 아주 다 야딱될 말이지 누가 뭐 배세다버리 들이 지박을 비용 쓰고 요래지
And so the song then says, "O student lady Bardabom, listen, you wealthy one with faith. Your future lives extend far beyond this one, but have you prepared provisions for them? If you haven't prepared provisions for them, that provision is generosity. You should be generous. This enemy, the guard dog called avarice, though you think it's beneficial, will only bring harm. Have you understood that avarice is an enemy? If you understand, then you should leave it behind." So this is about generosity, and this is actually what the Buddha had first taught when he first taught the Dharma as an antidote to self-grasping and also avarice or stinginess. He began the teachings with generosity, the first of the 6 paramitas, and it's therefore considered a very important practice. It is the antidote to self-grasping. So your future lives extend far beyond this one. So now in this life, we have found the precious human body. And those who have learned about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind have practiced and reflected on the difficulty of finding a precious human body and have habituated to that for a long time. And in the scriptures, there are many examples on how we can reflect upon that, the difficulty of finding a precious human body, for example, in terms of its causes, in terms of illustrations, in terms of numbers, and so on. So when we think about that, we realize, oh, it is really hard to find a precious human body. And you only find it once in a while, not very often. It's very hard to find. For the most part, we are wandering around in samsara. For the longer part, we are wandering in samsara and we experience the suffering of impoverishment and hunger and thirst. The antidote to that suffering is to practice generosity. Normally, when we have to give something, stinginess arises. And how is that an enemy? It is that So even though you're stingy and you think when you hold on to something, you don't give it away, it will be of benefit, actually, or you get rich from that. Actually, if you do not have the merit, then even if you try to hold on to something, you will not get rich. On the other hand, if you have created merit in a previous life, then even if you're not stingy, you will just naturally find perfect wealth in this life. And so also generosity arises from love. Because you love others, you give to them, you're generous to them. Sometimes people think that I'm poor, I don't have a lot of things, so I don't have any means to accumulate merit. But actually the most important part of practicing generosity is actually the mind and not the actual physical giving. It is said that if one gives like Chinrezig, just a spoonful of food or so to an animal with a mind of love, then the merit is great. So the mind is more important than the material thing that is given when we dedicate. For example, we can always think in this way when there's leftover food and so on a plate, then we can think that this leftover is given to the hungry spirits. And that also becomes generosity because those sentient beings suffer from hunger and from thirst. The cause of birth in the hungry spirit realm is stinginess or avarice. And avarice or stinginess arises from attachment. Actually, attachment and stinginess are in a union. But also often it is said that as a result of attachment, one takes birth as a human being, and as a result of avarice or stinginess, one takes birth as a hungry spirit. So it's good to understand the kind of the function of what each of and what kind of thing the afflictive emotions perform, what comes from them, the repercussions that come from the afflictions. And that's often also actually explained in different other religions. For example, in Christianity, Jesus had said that you should pay less attention to the worldly treasure houses, but invest your wealth in the treasure house of the heavens, because the worldly treasure house is impermanent. And what he's really speaking about is actually also generosity. So we find these practices of generosity and ethical discipline and so on also in other religions. And so in general, all the religions are actually very good. So we call them, those non-Buddhist traditions, we call them dirtikas, which kind of means like not raised, but actually all the religions are naturally raised. They all are, they're all very beneficial, and they all teach very beneficial practices.
Samsara chimorese, Milarepa, Dewa Tattva, lot of Todi Chile, Dewa Tondo. So, Kala Sara, Totini, young Dewa Tondo, Kali Dinan, was a Kalasana, Demalami, the Chuban don't go. So the young Tamjis in Chuban. Gondola di Magasar, Naga Kalari, some Saturday nights with the Pochayo, second way. They put those on two, most of control getting changing or sometimes they bought the Sanjik and Chingu or Shankoma, Purple Pion, Rangatini, Tambo, Yin Payosa, Shen woman, the little Rangati, Torso Tajata, Shen woman, who somebody who gets top goal, Musity, Kalati top goal, my. Could somebody who gets top, somebody who gets it, the Dati Sendalas what are the very Senara, the Sen Ibutimba, so get the same Senata, where they really young woman on war, Tata Santa Surta, the last of what you call Tamanangiti, the Petu Mevata, Patanga, Teta, and Moari, Kotoke, more single, more sugar, more shitty, Pion, the Tokyo, the Pion, the get at it in Sancho, who then simply touches Sanjet of a Jeromo, something. Yin Tam Chiga, Giasipate, Gisayang, Jibaton, Teta Gerate, Jibango, Tamchi Jibachade, Shinkoman, Chuka, Medate, La Sopata, Dosum Jikin, Bujandi, Dosum Jikin, come the loss of it. Chigo Koa did Dadi Mili Chikayama, Dini Boratini. Ti dadi di tamchi rangi dadi di jiwa di ya dili di ya gongli shengkoman buwe yori shengchi tamchi dadi di ya yini di yinping dadi chetab se la yinping lo tsar yinping chetab kina dadi pa chetab se ki yori di tawa se nga dili jodo kala sana dili rangi zubo nangla ngaga sao ma sang sabba mpra mangbo yori di tab jiga saa rong tonggo yori pingpa simba yori dili sambata ngeji kimbo yori nuka simba yori nyumo mo yori 탐지에 서버 오 마치고 말이 소소사는 들이 무슨 농내들이 대상고 요래 서버서 와송고 요래 탐지 집아 차대 요래 제일 제도 집아가 샘대 오나 들이 나오냐 봐 니들 빠차 요고 말이 나차 나도서 집아차 이거 서서들이 대다가 다시 주바대 저들 일이라 오늘들이 말아리베자 동 토거지 집어서 나 대다가 송고 요래 So
when we practice generosity, also love is most important, and I said. So Milarepa have also said that when you practice generosity, ultimately it is the mind that wants to give away, that you want to practice generosity. For example, when you're eating food, then you're not thinking I'm eating the food, but first we are dedicating the food, we are offering it. For example, by saying that prayer, I offer it to the Buddha, the teacher, and the Dharma, and so forth. And in that way, this dedication of our food becomes an offering to the higher beings, the Buddhas, and also to the sentient beings. On the other hand, if you think that I am eating the food, that's my food, then you're placing an imprint of self-grasping in your mind. So therefore think I'm offering this food to the three jewels. And the three jewels know of our offering. When sentient beings give rise to faith, the Buddhas know that. So there's therefore great benefit in making offerings to those higher beings, the Buddhas. So when we eat, therefore we think I'm offering it to the Buddhas, and also I'm dedicating it to the sentient beings. And actually, it's not really the food that those sentient beings receive, but what they receive when you dedicate the food for them is your love and your compassion, and that is what they need. And that is what will purify their self-grasping and also stinginess. So being generous is the antidote to that, and the antidote to stinginess and self-grasping. And when we dedicate to sentient beings, we can dedicate food. Sometimes we also dedicate by making a smoke offering for the living and for the deceased and so on. There's different ways of dedicating for sentient beings. And anything that maybe is some kind of leftover remainder that we don't have use for too, we can make it a dedication for sentient beings. We just have to know how to properly dedicate, and then there will be great benefit. And when you dedicate, you should think that I'm dedicating this root of virtue for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And then when other people practice virtue, the virtue of generosity, rejoice in that. So that also, rejoicing in generosity is also a form of generosity. And so then we also offer mandala to the three jewels, where we offer the billionfold universe. And what we really offer is the self-grasping of all sentient beings. Because throughout all the realms of samsara, there is not a single sentient being without self-grasping. So during the mandala offering, we bring to mind all of that self-grasping, And then we are offering it up to the Buddhas, and then think that all sentient beings have now separated from self-grasping. And actually how it really happens is that when you cultivate an altruistic mind, as the altruistic mind increases, the self-grasping mind decreases. Also, when you're eating food, you shouldn't think that I am the one eating it for myself, for my body, because you are not just your body. You're not alone. In your body, there are many, countless, hundreds and thousands of different bacteria, microorganisms. They also need to eat. There's different kinds of bugs in your body. Some are beneficial. They are those organisms of love and compassion. And some are those bacteria that cause harm. And they are related to the afflictive emotions. So don't think that it's just me, but there's all these beings. For example, during the Nyungne practice, that is how we think. We also think about all of these microorganisms in our body. And in this way, eating itself becomes an act of generosity. And when such a mind of generosity has arisen, then you will not create a further imprint of me or I, thinking that I'm hungry or I'm cold and so on. But you're giving it all up. You're making it an offering. Also elsewhere, Milarepa had said, I have the instruction where all eating and drinking become a feast offering, a Gana Chakra offering. So think about it, because in this way, the practice becomes quite easy.
나 매삼들이 가세오는데 되게 라서가 들이다서 속차 가시에는들이 가충충들이 다때 속차 차점들이 이거 두고 지지 로도니 들이 마음 통성 이 무슨 속차 가시센다고 요래 뭐 차우스요라 제 속차들 속다 이거 벌써 뒤에서 너무 따뜻하고 대고 차도 고 노도 직차들 로도고 말이 저 호강들이 들이 이다가면 매번 땅아삼 또아주 용산 가세우나 사야만 보는 다른 곳으로 강지 대락받듯이 놀러도 같이 치라지 같이 세라 치러요. 이 신나게 팽그 말이지. 이 다시와는 제레 데르티네들이 동생문을 데르티니 놀러도 데르 집안인 중이요. 해서
So avarice or stinginess is an enemy. So when often actually no matter how much possessions we have, and often the more we have, the greater is our stinginess, the more it actually increases. Guru Rinpoche also said that whoever has a lot of wealth also has a lot of stinginess or avarice. For example, some people have many millions of dollars and still they feel, I need more, it's not enough. And they feel, I don't have anything even. And so no matter how much they have, they still feel that they need more. There's stinginess increases to the extent that one's wealth increases. And then a natural manifestation of such a state of mind, for example, is a little like bug, it's like a leech that first it's very small, tiny little animal. And once it latches onto your skin and sucks your blood, it grows really big, filling its belly with blood. And that's actually the existence of a hungry spirit. In the scriptures, it is said a hungry spirit has a throat as thin as a needle and a belly as large as a valley. So often the greater our wealth, the greater is also our stinginess, our greed. And stinginess, however, is of no benefit to us. It is only the cause of taking birth as a hungry spirit. So therefore, as an antidote to that, we practice generosity, or a wish to give.
Okay, Jamai Padam, Chende Samama Bana, Drumi Trapsu Chula, Drumi Trapsu Machuna, Asari and Bego, Yansar, Datamuk, Yanki, the Pimar Zoyan, Pacha, Tamuk Dawa and Barshia, Samson, Little Tamuk, the Mark was 7 day look my pony, telling you Moto Jelly, Telita. 千这个什么没把拿上来，这什么个把这正常他们接的呢？现在内陆嘛，通的，这里这里牛毛不让我在下肉呢，这里主要都下用过来，你就让个牛毛把第一件事了，怕那下用这还好用嘛？这里就我说这错啊，这大人你这东西用的，这里主要都说当然了，牛毛把刚说起这用用的，这为了是我啥去把这里刚里。 세부 내륙도 하고는 내륙도 그다 유무가 가리는 연발기도 하고 그래 유무가 때 하고서 유무가 식도요래 배나 상도래 세부 내륙서 통화 뒤 하나 들이 바도니지 제대로 유무가 상승처럼 바도니 유무랑 어때 샤야요만 상속 세별랑 우리 생각이 샤요요래 랑 셈는 상속 세우는 뒤랑 우리 생각하면 라이거 딱 사용을 라는 시험들이 더 나아지지 우선 들이 만나다고 차원에 들이 내용만 통 들이 다다들이 레좀 데라지 싸니 매와 끼와 가서 레좀 케미니 바데 저때 또 먹지 내용만 통이 준비를 시키게 말이야 준비를 시키 맞지는 들이 다다다 최소만 우선 세마다 내가想我写到那都没俺家吧那当中那我是들이 무슨 끼와리네 들이 다단 잡으려는 거서 同就是没做完了，说把说唱咱们这，那你这把没人没得几把那个这个这些呢，你这的就把这35说呢，就这给这上不上手，一说的几尺的，当初公话就是这他们什么种呢？他们就这个上手来，咱们那个地道他们的就这个上手来。 Dewa sampai sampai orang tu, demi tapi dati dan nyumu ber ramu re, sampai hak tu, jadi jubel yang tak boleh cici tu kau re. Di tahu macam ni, rasa sih bertata, orang sengguh nelu kau nyumu bahak ko, jadi nyumu bahak cungi bahak ko, jadi ni tu sengkau lah syadri, cakap lap najeri, hak ko tu ni mi sudah jadi cawat deki orang mari. 这里有梦一些是同的，然后那些一些人跑了，这里有梦一些人就是有梦些找这个样的，我们家里他这个有梦把找他呢，这里下边不大的，这里吃草我长龙吃菜，白天打了这里，为啥光我来说？啥是把这大山家这边内陆的，什么内陆通啊，这了个啥子？内陆通啥我，那个什么内陆通，这到里面呢也说。
Then the next song, O student Lady Bardabum, your future lives will be even darker than this one. Have you prepared a lamp for yourself? If you haven't prepared a lamp for yourself, that lamp is luminosity. You should familiarize with it. This enemy, a corpse-like sleep called ignorance, though you think it's beneficial, will only do harm. Do you understand that ignorance is an enemy? If you do, then you should leave it behind. So ignorance, delusion, is to not see the nature of the mind. And when one doesn't see the nature of the mind, the afflictive emotions arise. So your future lives will be even darker than this one. In the future, when the bardo manifests, if you do not know the nature of the mind, then the various confused appearances will manifest to you. Will manifest to you. And what appears to you is actually a reflection of your own mind. It is the natural manifestation of your own afflictive emotions, the 6 afflictive emotions, which are on the basis which cause the projection of the various appearances. But we do not recognize that at that time due to our dualistic perception of self and other. So here it mentions luminosity, the lamp of luminosity. So normally, now when we lack luminosity of seeing the nature of the mind, then the afflictive emotions, whichever one of the afflictive emotions is predominant, will lead to the experience of the 6 realms of samsara. But if one does know the nature of the mind, then one will recognize all the afflictive emotions that arise. And through clear recognition, they will dissolve. They will become cleared away. So when one seeing the nature of the mind, this seeing of the mind's nature is luminosity. And if in this life, one has cleared away the afflictive emotions through having seen the nature of the mind, then also in the bardo, these afflictive emotions cannot manifest as self-projections. Then if bodhicitta is present in the mind, the natural manifestation of bodhicitta will appear in the form of the Pure Lands and the deities and so forth. If self-grasping is present, one finds oneself in a state of darkness, of not seeing one's own true nature. There are some people, for example, who do not believe in karma at all, who do not believe in past and future lives. And that is ignorance, the darkness of ignorance, not seeing. And when one doesn't see the nature of the mind, one will also not believe in karma. And then one believes one's actual manifest experience as to be reality. For example, when the reality seems hellish, one thinks that I am in hell, I really experience hell. Or you take birth as a hungry spirit and there is an actual true experience of that kind of suffering. Or there's all kinds of other countless animals. For example, there's ants and different insects who run around day and night working hard just like human beings. Jigten Sumgön had said in the Gongchik, karmic ripening, cause and effect, is the manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. Everything arises from the state of mind. All karma arises from that. All happiness and suffering in the world arises from that. All happiness arises from love, and all suffering arises from self-grasping. Everything that is experienced is the projection of one's own mind, one's own afflictive emotions. And when you understand that, you will be able to trust karma really from deep within. So luminosity means to know the nature of your mind, to recognize the afflictive emotions, to see the fault in the afflictive emotions. And when you see that, then they might arise, but just like a wave on water, and through recognition will again disappear. And when they disappear, they will leave no feeling behind. And then you will see that the true nature of afflictive emotions is actually primordial wisdom. So first, consciousness becomes primordial wisdom, and then you are able to liberate all afflictive emotions into primordial wisdom. So a person who can meditate in this way, if one is able to liberate the afflictive emotions, that is a sign of possessing wisdom. That wisdom is just like hot water. And so here, Milarepa introduces to the meditation of luminosity. Luminosity is the seeing of the nature of mind, or it is the nature of Mahamudra, which is like a lamp.
다 박차대 대해서 또 세상 박차 대해서는 또 산이냐와 차용을 해. 셀 박차 대해서 이다 차용을 좀 비스 개척 삼바랑 좋지 봐대. 뒷발이 차용이 참만 내가 빨리 잡고 그래서다. 이 빨자 마족대 시지 시대가리다 시자 다시 시겠다고 그래. 오 망니 세파세라고 그래. 뒤들어가 세상 대해서 산이 자자장하는 자와 차용을 해. 세상 약보 말에서 당상 시다리 맞들 컨트롤메가 차서 다주 차용이야 요 말이. 되게 인가 박차들이 있어. 들이 말한 건 뭐니? 들이 말한 하고와. 들이 말한 거는 하고를 드리는데 말한 레스 하고는 말한 거니 들이 말한 개와를 줘. 들이 라더들이 인속 갖고는 인속 말한 매가 차로 요래. 말한 매가 차 나갔다 담도 깝들이 들이 인속을 써서는 들이 지나 그만 매가 차로 선남 잠들이 니 세 촉초 연마 니 겁대와라 세 촉초대로 차들이 두고 살종 대성들이 봐도 죽어도 상계에서 쪼르들이 곰냐미데 녀람남들야 녀카다 말람 세고래야 말람 니발 체미나 들이 고발롱도 줘봐서 곰약소들 말람도 따대 말람 생무슨 따고래 어살때 말람도 체송고요래지.
For example, so how we don't recognize ignorance is, for example, you ask someone, so how did you sleep? And a person said, I slept really well. And then you said, oh, that's great. And then when we can't sleep, we think this is our greatest difficulty. We consider sleep as very important. And so this actually the attachment to sleep, so on, is actually ignorance. But it does not just happen at nighttime when we are sleeping, it also happens during the daytime. Ignorance appears in many different forms. For example, in the daytime, in the waking state, when afflictive emotions arise, and we do not see their fault, that's ignorance. And also sometimes, even if we do see their fault and we still become controlled by them, also is in a way ignorance. So therefore, during the waking state, we need to practice recognizing all the afflictive emotions that arise. For example, when you get angry at a person, then immediately recognize that and liberate the anger. And then later, when you see that person again, there will be no trace of anger behind. And in this way, you are purifying these habitual imprints in your mind. So these imprints that we always create that come from this concept of me are like taking a picture with a camera. So whenever we follow something in this way through grasping, it's like we are taking a picture. And if you create this imprint of following anger, for example, then you have stored that picture in your mind. And if that is stored in your mind, then later on, hell will definitely manifest before you. It is the manifestation of your own mind. As we said before, cause and effect is the manifestation of the moment-to-moment thoughts. So whatever picture we take right now, whatever we store in the mind right now, is what we then will experience later on. So it's important to clearly see that, to recognize that, and recognize that this is an obstacle in my mind. Anger has arisen. Anger remains. If anger remains in my mind, then with 100% certainty later on, I will experience hell. It will manifest before me. So recognize that and cultivate, if you cultivate love, bodhicitta, and so forth, then the next time you see the person, you recognize the fault of anger, then there's no more anger left behind. So then there's nothing negative that will manifest to you. So this is how we should practice during the daytime. And then we can also practice while we are sleeping and dreaming. Then we bring this recognition into our dream state, and eventually we will recognize that we are in the dream state. And so ideally, that's what you recognize. You have full awareness during the dream state. And that is what we call then recognizing the luminosity of the sleep state. So normally we dream and then normally we fall into a state of unconsciousness and it becomes completely dark. And so when one has trained in sustaining luminosity, then even though one is actually sleeping, one still sustains a clarity. There still is a clear mind. And so you are able to wake up at any moment, but also sleeping at the same time. And also the process of sleep. When that is sustained, it is said one attains enlightenment in the Dharmakaya, in the Bardo, in the first Bardo. So in this way, we are merging our waking state practice with the dream state. And so that is very important in our practice to merge these. Milarepa also said elsewhere, when there is no difference between the waking state and the dream state, that is the perfection or the mastery of meditation. So this one here is speaking about recognizing this luminosity, which is the recognition during the daytime, which is then also brought into the nighttime when we are dreaming.
Jingé Tritata Canavim, quando dopo Monana sono tri Trima Meva, Terrasotre, the Modoka Dunzer, two children, a sungore, there Pa Meva Doka Sama the Mok Chap de Yore, the Mok Chanatri Range. When he she gets the Legatapa, you have all the telling you want the short song, the language short song. 그래서 레롱 그지서 소송은 레롱 대다시 도목왕의 쇼로요에 라왕메 봐. 이 소송들이 레롱 지서 소송들이 빠도네들이 이 레사앙을 다다 레사앙들이 빠잡소는들이 답변조들 빠잡소는 뒤뒤 박차지 뭐고 다 양반의 샤요고래. 그리다가 샤과지우들이 뒤뒤 땅한 주시동송 땅이 뭐만 말해서 뭐 중에 사는 하고는 들이 따다 양대 작가시에서 들이 코가 토바메가 빠차다게 다 듣고요. 그래서 근데 사자집에 다 그놈들이 레파 차서 다 듣고요. 별로 까빠 돈도서 보면 봐요. 룸이 찍으면 뭐 서로 세서 룸이 되 강래. 뒤다다 룸이 시바제도 따와리 석진 적신 될어서 오시거래. 대답제 맹맹이 대서 맹치만 만지로 갔다 말아래비. 들이랑게 내려서 따와 Rang sevi nero rang tawasi. Iri kajuberla majabu na sugoyo. Rasin saje yambate ta chene. Iri rang saje kare, rasin saje kare let. O rang sevi namto tamche da tawa. Namto tamche da tawa, jaba tamche da tawa de sanje. Iri je de sede namka tawa saja tibe to katang tibe. Ti karchibo osari chiba sabo tes zongori. Nyakar teola te nyakar go sari. Ni lo teola te ni go sari. Iri tokare te kontro te ni sokata me te tate deki ore. Te tawa te tata pardo kosomo sanje de na. Titemi tawa titemi ro ore. Tati ti kimba mewa charo je te mogre. Ti mok tarto pade te ni. Te mok mo shiro te mok lo ti te mok sereze. So you're in the young Hadan Cartable. The Mongol law carry. Muni Saja Chibi Tona, the young Tadina, the don't chick young neighbor, send Nakata. That is so hako to worry. Oh, send Nakata hako to worry. The Mongol is a hako your money. Oh, they don't charge on that equal the Sunny equal not Jibo Charson, son. Jibo Charson, Kare Charson, the truth not door charity. Don't need the number of the other chick chat. 되게 남도 사이죠. 양 동일이 당 차당이 되게 무슨 들이 차당이 애들이 또 목종 때문에 너 자세당이 매는 또 목종 그요. 차당이 아니야들 때리 또 목종 그요. 실랑시 그런 나빠 따라서라 들이더라. 따들어 또 목건 타토가 단진 쪽이요. 단진 쪽으로지 이게 뭐라 이비로 다시 내 공부를 좀 삼바 재미도 있잖아. 들이 jenny 샘지 탁체래요래. 들이 샘지 다티고 차더래. 그러나 잡아서 받아서 뒤들이 다시 내 공부를 들이 내 세군데 이렇게 통수고요. 대양들이 또 먹으면 또 먹지 자속 난디는 난디지 이보다 딱 산속세고 산속세면 좀 두고요 말이. 근데 하자 같이 보리 어서시 봐서 사자집에 따와 뒤집어 쏘고요. 그 방송들이
And so ignorance is really pervasive. It arises at any time. And so, for example, it is not just the dream or the sleep state when we fall into a sleep state, but for example, there is those who, even though they know karma, they do not consider it. So they do not act in accordance with it. And that's ignorance, for example, or delusion. It is said that there are 7 concepts of ignorance. And these are detailed listed in the Samantabhadra prayer. Some of them are unmindfulness, dullness, or feeling irritated or angry for no apparent reason. So when there's no real suffering, to just feel angry and not happy for no reason. That's also ignorance. In the Bodhicharyavatara, it is said that there are those 7 concepts of ignorance. And so ignorance is basically unmindfulness that pervades anything that we do. So even though we actually know, for example, that things that is an afflictive emotion and so forth, or negative karma, we still follow it. So we know, so knowingly we do things that we shouldn't do, and that's ignorance. We know that there's an afflictive emotion, but then we still follow it. We become controlled by it. And if we become controlled by the afflictions, then we have been controlled by our karmic winds. And then we lack later in the bardo, being controlled by the karmic winds, we have no more self-control. We are controlled by the karmic winds of ignorance later in the bardo. So in this way, we accumulate karma, like taking a picture which stores these imprints in our mind. And then these manifest again and again. So one method also to purify these is to perform confession. That is to think, especially that part where we think that I will refrain from again repeating these negative actions. So we are committing to not again repeat those actions. We recognize the fault in these actions, in these afflictive emotions. And then we are able to purify them. And when these become purified and we see the nature of Mahamudra, then it is said that the darkness of 1,000 aeons is cleared away by a single lamp flame. So then by seeing the nature of mind, or by seeing Mahamudra, all these karmas and imprints accumulated since beginningless times are cleared away. So therefore it is like a lamp. This view, the nature of the mind, seeing the nature of the mind is like a lamp. And yesterday we mentioned it is given different names like Mahamudra or Dzogchen and so on, but all it refers to is to see the true nature of your mind. This is what we call the view. In the Kagyun tradition, in the prayer called calling the Guru from afar. It says, you must resolve, I must resolve my own mind to be Buddha. And we resolve that at a time when you rest in the natural state and the mind that is completely free of all thinking, and there is no grasping at all within the mind. And that is like the clear mind, the awakened mind, or the Sang in the Sangye, which means Buddha. And Ye, the second syllable, means vast. That is the state of Mahamudra. That is the nature of luminosity, this clear vastness that we also mentioned yesterday. So during the daytime, we practice luminosity in this way. And also, as we mentioned before, when we sleep in our dreams, we sustain awareness. And as awareness is sustained, eventually it will even remain during the deep sleep state. And that then leads to the enlightenment in the Bardo. In the Bardo, we speak about the enlightenment in the 3 kayas, 3 levels of enlightenment. So basically it depends on our realization, our seeing of the nature of the mind. When we are unmindful, that is ignorance. And that is cleared away by seeing. Also in the Manjushri Namazangiti, it is that it is the ignorant mind, the mind that sees itself, that clears away its own ignorance. So by seeing the ignorant mind is the ignorance is cleared away. So when there's an ignorant mind, but once you see it, it is called Mahamudra. And when you see it, what you experience is a state free of all conceptual thought, a space like nature that clearly knows. It knows its own space like nature. So ignorance, the quality of ignorance is that it doesn't know. It doesn't see. So, for example, also when we fall asleep, often we consider that sleeping to be very blissful. We like to sleep. And why do we experience it as blissful? It is because when you're sleeping, you are not thinking. So when you're not thinking, you experience bliss. Suffering is thinking. All the suffering is created by our thinking. And then that develops into also an attachment to pleasure and aversion against suffering. So it is actually these 2 thoughts of attachment and aversion that create this delusion in the mind. If you wouldn't have attachment and aversion, nothing to be attached to, no aversion, then this delusion of ignorance would not be created. So they're kind of interdependent in this way. But the ultimate delusion or the ultimate ignorance is self-grasping. And the antidote to it is the altruistic mind. So also when you practice meditation, shamatha, calm abiding, it is good to base that practice on a mind of immeasurable love. So first you cultivate a mind of immeasurable love, because that makes the mind first become vast and open and stable. And then on the basis of that, you practice calm abiding. So love is this all-pervasive power. It is said that the power, the all-pervasive power is the power of love. And then when you remain within that state of this meditative state, within that, then you can see the nature of the mind. So again, the ultimate ignorance is self-grasping. And the antidote necessary is bodhicitta. And that's really the only thing that will protect one from self-grasping. So it is really most important, even though here we are talking about luminosity. And that is actually the crucial point of luminosity, or the view of Mahamudra.
그것도 뭐 탑재 참말에 것이 로마 참말에 요래지는 네 재미 김바메바 재미 단용 영바이 탑당 목당 이바당 Jartang Lelo, Tabak, Jami, so song chanson, to know me song seminary, to know Dokshuri, Cheering Botry, to know the Takapori, Nyawada Yadata Jeti, Yen Tong Songori, non Katsatri, the Toba Danger, to Yogan is so good, the Tobakari, Tati and three.当的去去看一个钱呢，大大做么说嘛，看就嘛就这都没了，这都没了哦，对了说，这里有话给表现不干的，这里你空都有吧？对了说，他别经常说我的，就有的，经常打了这里说我的，这里是哈告诉了，搞这里两面结巴个，哦，这里是这里写的文字出过来，干嘛说的？这干嘛来的？这都没来的文字出过来，还叫脾气不有来的，那个这里这些呢，家也有的，可当忙了这些呢嘛不有的，都没文字过来，开心不来的。
And it's very important to recognize these ignorant thoughts or states of mind. All of my disciples have the Samantabhadra prayer, and the Samantabhadra prayer explains it well. So it says that when you fall into a state of unconsciousness, then there arises states of indifference, a lack of mental clarity, sleepiness, sluggishness, loss of consciousness, laziness. And these 7 forms of ignorance are said to be the cause of taking birth in the animal realm. And it is said that of the 3 lower realms, the worst is actually the animal realm, because the animal realm is long, the animal's lifespan is longer, and it's very difficult. It is most difficult to become liberated from the animal realm. In hell, in the hells and hungry spirit realms, the lifespan is said to be shorter, and the suffering is much more intense. But it's more difficult to become liberated from the animal realm. So in any case, the Bodhisattva mentions those 7 thoughts or forms of ignorance, and also the Samantabhadra prayer explains those 7. So if there is this indifferent state of ignorance, if one is controlled by that, then whatever one does, whether it's a mundane activity or one practices the Dharma, whatever one does, one will be careless in all one's actions, and one will not want to do anything. So one will feel lazy about anything. And when it comes to practicing virtue or doing something with body and speech, one would rather sleep or not do it, and so on. And so at that time, it is important to recognize. So first we learn about it, and then when we practice and these moments arise, then you should recognize them. Oh, that is it. Now this form of ignorance, this mind of ignorance has arisen within me. So with wisdom, the wisdom recognizes its arising, just like recognizing a thief. Here it is, I'm being ignorant. So it's extremely important to recognize that. It's very important to recognize these thoughts of ignorance.
Kapo giver rexo chobata je la churete tate che deve sabanji qua chedino tanji qua kamridina sen della tenina che sembra deve sem haja nyongre tiri mege semteni pe maware ni ma chelo tiri sabata ngeje tenka che chedina 지라이 망고 제 두고 요마 때 지네 와서 위로래 이 유모마 제제 지야오도 보나 샤로나 드린 정나 하자 치보요래 드리 대지스니 다다 니지 다다 저바 마저도 다진이지 그 두고 다리디 이레스 데르 티니 드리다 다다 저바 샤롱 제데 무슨 제마 다다리 동이 카차와 다다리 정나 지와 이 차데 요래 때 제데에서 만져 봐 체스 Kirmala Tata Sachi Jam Sarge. When a lag on other Kaishivata lag on Chiba Tata La, Yadam Ranga Kangtina, Plata Lama Soatamadi, Yadam Te, Yang Three, Gombe, Luja Bachata, Paji, Song Market, Rao Bachata, Samsara, Sem Bachata, the Tataran, the Raga look Boko, the Kadon, Lundo, Handa, Chan, Sem Kwangan, the Yasunta, like a down to Piore. Teaching down to the dark already. Kadina Lade, Kujin Shalom Sawa, Sem Machana, Lade, Hajam Zewa Chimbo, Deba Chimbo. Deya me pa machi po pata wa sami deya me pa shalo go yore. Ti shalo kalmi tiri lati ta kimbe yishi zebe tokji zebe chile choba nimta ti tamchi kola labi ti yung ti takpa taadi la soba labi ti chila ti lati ngosum tima sami deya me pa pena che kange ti sasonga labsa kipsi chuma labsa wa ti dawa chaya ngore. Ka tini ta pardo dongi kare shalo nga tini muni lati tini tamna Lamsang Trinity, you got a ticket made over. Kari said made over. True, Tari, Pacha, Dunge, Pacha, Tamsi, Nadi Toyore. Nadi Tola. Lati, Yang Takwan treated to same Koran, yet the desicking body. Tito Pacha, Kanya, desicking body, Raola, the religion Pacha, like cock a dog. Nadi Pacha, song a dog, a dollar. Three same Koran, she said, some Sama Saja, the Rosama Goma, child, Rashi Shayong, you my bed, Munity, door to the door, Tom took Tatara, children. Say, oh, you don't get a stone another flash it about. Teach her about it. Teach her to teach him out of the Lachi, which is so. There's like a dumpty for it.
Then next it says, O student Lady Bardabum, your future lives will be more fearful than this one. Have you prepared a guide and protector? If you haven't prepared a guide and protector, that guide is Sublime Dharma. You should practice it well, and so on. So practicing the Sublime Dharma, now here it refers to also practicing the Yidam deity and reciting the mantra, supplicating the Guru, in brief, all the virtuous activities that we engage in. So your future lives will be more fearful than this one. Now, in this life, when we look at our mind in just one day, our virtuous states of mind are very few. And our non-virtuous states of mind are so many. We just think about one single day, how many thoughts of love and compassion really arise in our mind. And then even those that arise are turned away by various conditions again. They don't remain. And so later in the bardo, the fear that we will experience will be even greater than now when we are alive. And that is due to our dualistic grasping becoming like magnified. At that time, this perception of self and other is extremely pronounced, very thick. Delusion is very powerful, and therefore fear will arise. And the fear that arises at that time is much more intense than the fear or the suffering that we experience right now. So what we can do, practice the Sublime Dharma, it says here. And so that here specifically refers to practicing the Yidam deity, reciting the deity's mantra. So how do we do that? When we practice the deity, we supplicate to the deity. Any deity that you practice, you supplicate to the deity, you supplicate to the Guru. And so when you bring to mind the deity's form over and over again, you visualize the deity's form, you will eventually forget about the ordinary body. And so the imprints of the ordinary body are purified. And then by reciting the deity's mantra, the imprints of speech become purified. And the mind becomes purified by cultivating bodhicitta. And so then your body, which is just like an empty house, can arise in the rainbow-like form of the deity. And so when you practice the deity, what's not most important is not most important to visualize the deity's form, its elements, the implements, the deity's color, and so on so clearly. Even if that is not so clear, what's more important is what really then arises when you accomplish the deity is what appears then is the deity's, the love that you have for the deity, your love and the faith. And the deity always remains with you. You never forget about the deity, just like a mother never forgets about her child. And when the deity arises, its qualities appear. The qualities of omniscient wisdom, of loving compassion, and the power to grant protection. So think about the deity's qualities, and also you can learn about these qualities in the context of recollecting the purity. But basically, in the end, you will not forget about the deity. The deity will not leave your mind. So to habituate to that, it's important to remember the deity. For example, when you experience difficulties, you should be able to instantly call upon Tara. The moment you call upon Tara, Tara is there. And if you habituate to that, then also later in the bardo, when various suffering and various manifestations appear, at that time, if you remember Tara, then she will actually appear. And by remembering Tara, then these frightening appearances of the bardo will instantly disappear. And why do they disappear? It's because these manifestations are nothing but your own imprints, and all imprints reside in self-grasping. So only if there is self-grasping are there imprints. And the moment you think of the deity with love and with faith, then there is no self-grasping in that moment, so there are no imprints. And when there are no imprints, all there is your Buddha nature. And your Buddha nature itself has no such imprints. And then the deity can naturally appear because it is a quality of your own Buddha nature. So then a deity appears as the natural radiance of your own Buddha nature. And so to habituate to it, therefore, we visualize our body in the form of the deity in order to turn away or purify the imprints of the body. And we recite the deity's mantra in order to purify the imprints of the speech. And so in this way, we are purifying the mind, just like purifying our clothing, until it becomes natural. And then, so this is how it has to become ultimately. Then all negative appearances will be turned away. So in brief, whether or not this will actually happen mainly depends on your own faith, your own trust in the deity. And therefore it is so important that whenever you encounter difficulties, that you're able to instantly remember the deity. So this is kind of a habit that has to be accomplished. And so here the guide of practicing the Sublime Dharma refers to the practice of the Yidam deity and the recitation of the mantra.
Product Chumasol, China, religious, but there are what you are in your so I'm going to talk to you. They're telling you, but Dawaya married the Rangle Nubagatri, the Dawa child with your raison. They wait that they build something one young, the whole Rangatri, Tabatopnetri, Yambil paint over it, Chami Demona, Sumatri, Danetri. Or the whole run Tabatopnetri, Yambil paint over it, don't Yambil Shinchapan Goreso. Yambil Chungtong de Jen, Rangat Chesam Hachi, George Gores.
And then it says, the enemy who dissuades you, called relatives, though you think they are beneficial, will only do harm. Do you know that relatives are enemies? If you do, then you should leave them behind. So saying that relatives are enemies, so they are not enemies in the sense of enemies that we despise, we have an aversion against, but our attachment, our clinging attachment to our loved ones does become an obstruction to our attaining the state of liberation and all-knowingness, and also diminishes our trust and inspiration in the pure form of the deity. And that will cause harm in the future. There is no benefit in being attached to relatives, to loved ones. One doesn't benefit them, and oneself will have to continue to wander in the samsara as a result. There's stories, for example, how people who were attached to, for example, their children or their wives and so on, then took birth in their bodies as like a creature, taking birth in their loved one's body and so on. So there is no benefit. We can actually not benefit them in this way, and we are actually causing them harm. So they are not an enemy per se, but they naturally obstruct our path, and therefore what actually happens, the function that they perform, is harmful. And so even though we do love our relatives, still how we should see it is that first we should attain liberation ourselves, and then having attained liberation, we can come back and help them. This is how it is explained in Chakmaraka Asya's aspiration prayer of Dewa of Sukhavati. In there it says, first attain liberation, go to Dewa Chen, and then you can help your relatives and friends. But it's important to abandon the attachment towards them. So we should consider the attachment towards them as not so important, and what we should consider as important is our practice of the Holy Dharma for this and future lives.
Send takwa yore, send takwa yore, send the yam the chinchi de ogore. Send chinchi de gaeta, sambata hinge the draw in son of Daniel. You but Shedan Chado Telas or Gentina the Tamas Teres, Telani so dim Totis of the Sodopa, young Shungu yore. Truth, Hamjig and Boteri, Sanjekateri, 강지 돈이 이제 봐요 이서 봐요 봐서 봐시바데 나그 셈들이 나그 세부대 잡지라시서 이제 제자시비 지시되오나 이 삼바다 인지 속다 대량들이 들이랑들이 하동시랑 하도 대마시는 오하고 도지 대발라서 봐 진시대 요리 존재들이 세부다리 유모 박차도 사고 선도 장만 쏘고 사실 좀 제가 셈들고 좀 다들이 대인들이 다다 중주되다 이 마행바데 영마송아 대체등 상들도 주도를 지하월 때 또 셈마이 와체지 로나도나 jan 로차 냥도 셈라도 진제 메버게요 인소 말아베송네 로나 도나 냐나 까리를 셈티스도로 나도 셈티상 바치네 그치는 유모 박차데 대마죠 사바다 얘기해서 나보죠.
And then next it says, your future life's path is more long and treacherous than this one. Have you prepared the stallion to ride? If you haven't prepared your stallion to ride, that stallion is diligence. Practice it well. So we have to practice diligence. And we practice diligence with our body, speech, and mind. And of the body, speech, and mind, the mind is most important. The Buddha said, completely tame your own mind. And so how do we consider the mind, or how are we diligent with the mind? So even though we engage in samsaric activities and we do not always have time to practice the Dharma formally, but with our mind, we can always sustain a state of mindfulness. And sustaining mindfulness, what are we mindful of? What are we paying attention to when we are mindful? With mindfulness, we recognize that love and compassion is our friend. We need to sustain it. And when an afflictive emotion, especially anger and jealousy, arise, then instantly you recognize it with mindfulness and purify it. In the 37 Bodhisattva Practices, in verse number 36, it mentions that in whatever you do, at all times, look at the state of your mind. So I mentioned this again and again. And that is the essence of Dharma practice, actually, this verse. It is said that what the Buddhas have said, that whatever we call emptiness, emptiness is actually a state of conscientiousness or mindful awareness. And with mindful awareness, you are clear as to what you know the state of your mind, and you sustain a mind of love and compassion. So if you're able to practice a mantra, then you can do that as well. Or if you don't know how to practice mantra, you can just practice the Oma Hung Vajra recitation. And the point is that the afflictive emotions and the imprints are cleared away. So that is what you're mindful of. You constantly remember that I have to purify my afflictive emotions. The Buddha had said, completely tame your own mind. So you think in this way. So diligence also really means, therefore, to not be distracted. And so even if you don't have the opportunity to spend your life in a retreat and do extensive Dharma practices, throughout your life, you can always practice mindfulness and non-distraction. Milarepa also had said, in whatever you do, whether you are sitting, standing, sitting, or lying down, look at your mind. This is the way to practice unceasing virtue. So at all times, look at your mind, recognize the afflictive emotions and habitual imprints, purify them, and sustain love and compassion. This is what you do with mindfulness. So then it says, this enemy that deceives you, called laziness, though you think it's beneficial, will only bring harm. Do you know that laziness is an enemy? If you do, then you should leave it behind. So laziness also is one of those 7 concepts of ignorance. For example, whatever you do, whether it's a Dharma activity or worldly activity, you put it off until later. You think, I will do it slowly, sometime later. And so also when it comes to being, not lazy with body, speech, and mind, and to practice virtue, again, the mind is most important. And so what does that mean? It means that look at your mind at all times. Always look at your mind. What is the state of my mind? What is arising in my mind? When you're waking up from sleeping, look at your mind right away. And then you're falling back to sleep. You're falling back asleep. And as you fall back asleep, again, look at your mind. And so look at your mind all the time. And then when you make it a habit that always look at your mind, you will also look at your mind when you are dreaming. So look at what arises. What's the state of my mind? What affliction arises? What thought arises in my mind? See everything that arises in your mind. That is looking at your mind. And in this way, by viewing it, by seeing everything that arises, everything becomes purified. And so with mindfulness, recognize whatever arises, be mindful of what arises, and be mindful of placing love and compassion into your mind. So throughout the 6 periods of day and night, at all times, whether you're standing, sitting, or lying down, look at your mind. That is most important, and that is also mostly of the greatest benefit. Gampopa also said that the undefiled virtue is far greater than the defiled virtue. And the undefiled virtue is to look at your mind at all times, in this life and in future lives all the time. And actually that is something that you can always do, even if you don't have much time to practice. You will always have time to look at your mind. You can always look at your mind when you do your job and so on. So remember these words, keep these words in mind. Whatever I do, whether I'm sitting, standing, or lying down, I look at my mind. So again, this is a good point to stop the teachings here today. My Dharma friends, and Dashi Delek to you all.
Thank you so much, Garchen Rinpoche, for your time.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. So Rinpoche will continue to teach at 8 a.m. tomorrow. It will be his last day of teachings, and through his kindness and compassion, that's why the special arrangements can actually be made. So before we turn on your mic to say good night to Rinpoche, please note that the break time is till 10 and be seated at 9:55 p.m. We will not close this Zoom room, so you may please do remember to turn off your video and mic after saying good night to Garchen Rinpoche. Admin, can I invite you to on the mic for our panelists? Thank you.
Good night, Garchen
Thank you,
Rinpoche.
Rinpoche.
Good night, thank you. Good night.
Hey, 你为什么按了什么东西？
I off the virtual background.
谢谢。
ございました。ありがとうございました。Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much. Good night. Good rest. Rinpoche.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Lila, thank you.
Thank you, Dharma brothers and sisters. Please be reminded to turn off your video and mic, and do come back at 10:55. Dorjen Rinpoche will also be teaching the 4 Dharmas of Gampopa at 4 p.m. Do encourage your friends, your relatives, whoever to actually come to join in the retreat as well as the teachings. Thank you, everyone. See you back here at 10 o'clock. Thank you.